Good morning, Ruth. We are live.
Yeah, good morning.
So, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Yeah,
Good.
I am. It's a quiet household here at the Morreys.
That's awesome. Well, for all my friends watching, this is Ruth Brennan Morrey. And we go, I won't say way back, but several years back. I met Ruth when I lived in Rochester, Minnesota, and we both trained at Rochester Athletic Club. So shout out to all of our friends there. So Ruth has an incredible career starting, really when you were young, playing soccer, but went to Wisconsin to play Division I soccer, went on to be a pro athlete. And so physically, you've been through the athletic training and the athletic side, which we talk a lot about here at, in my group. But you have the unique perspective of also being a psychologist and a mom, and have specialized in sports psychology as well. And so today we're going to talk about the mental training, how to be strong mentally, because wellness, you and I both know, wellness is not just physical. Mental is mental strength, and there's some really great strategies and practices that we're going to talk about later, but it is equally, if not more important than physical. And then we're going to also talk about youth sports, because you're really passionate about shaping the next generation of young athletes. So kind of a two-part discussion today, but I just can't wait to dig in. Thank you for being here. And if you wouldn't mind just telling our friends watching just a kind of a high-level view of who you are, your family, and your career.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Jess. I appreciate it. This will be fun. Well, I grew up here in Rochester, Minnesota, and I played soccer all of my childhood. And went, like you said, went to Wisconsin and played 4 years of Division I soccer there. Go Badgers! And then in between those years, I played semi-pro soccer during the summer months. But then after that, I took a marathon training class, and then my brother and my dad are very much into athletics and distance running. So I said, I think I want to run a marathon after my eligibility was finished. So I took this training class, and it was brutal. Like, it was very difficult. I didn't know, going from a soccer regimen to a distance running regimen was quite challenging. But I loved being told what to do and then do it and staying disciplined with the process. So that's what kind of catapulted me into my interest in distance running. And then in my second marathon, I ran the Grandma's Marathon, and I kind of mistakenly qualified for the Olympic trials in 2000 with a time of 2:48, and that led to a very short career in distance running, which was about 3 years long. And I'll maybe what changed later on. And then after my career was finished in about 2001, I decided to go to graduate school and in athletic counseling. And then I did my master's degree out in Massachusetts, then in sports psychology and athletic counseling, and then went on to get my PhD in counseling psychology with a health psychology focus. And then, so that was 10 years, but during that time, I did not engage in any kind of competitive sports at all. I dropped out in 2001, approximately. And then for about 10 years, I got my PhD, had 3 kids, and then was re-entered into the competitive world in 2012, where I started doing triathlon. And then I was an amateur for 2 years in triathlon and duathlon, and then became a professional triathlete and was and competed as a pro for 6 years. Retired from that in 2018, and then I just wanted to spend more time with the family. So I had just focused on distance running, and then recently qualified for and ran in the 2020 Olympic trials for the marathon.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And so tell me, So you got into running just because you love to run and it was a kind of a new challenge. What about the psychology component? What led you to, academically go down that route?
I think at the time, back then, my identity was very much steeped in sports. And so when I did my master's in athletic counseling, sports psychology, I had a different approach than how I would approach it now as a professional. And so back then, it was just kind of a natural merger of psychology and rehabilitation psychology, which was working with people with disabilities. And my mom had multiple sclerosis when I was growing up. And so listening, empathizing, understanding were skills that I learned young and practiced daily. And so the natural merger of just my love for helping people, understanding where they're coming from, and also my sport background, that was the merger back then.
Got it. And so I follow you on all the socials that we can. And so that's how we stay connected. And recently you posted a picture of yourself winning that first or qualifying for the Olympic trials as a 23-year-old versus as a 44-year-old, you qualified again. You beat your record by four more minutes?
4.5 minutes, yeah.
That's just incredible. After having 3 kids, 20 years later. And you said something really interesting is that you had the same focus, but a lot had changed. And of course, a lot's going to change in 20 years. But I would love to hear you compare yourself at a high level, kind of, you said you had a different mindset, different purpose, and different life perspective, and you were a completely different athlete. Yeah. So what were the big differences between, that 23-year-old Ruth with compared to 44-year-old Ruth?
So I'm going to throw out a term here that people are going to immediately think that they understand, but it's not what I think of it as. And that is, I think that I am much more mentally tough now. And what I mean by mentally tough is not gritting my teeth and being able to endure pain. It's number one, having a clear purpose for what I'm doing. And a process orientation. So back then I was very much outcome focused. Did I win the race? Did I win prize money? Did I, what place did I get? Did I improve my time? And now it's very much just embracing and having gratitude for my own sport journey, and knowing that is going to help propel me into the next phase of my life, but to really use the gifts and the talents that I've been given in an honoring way. And then knowing that that's not the end. If I'm doing this just for myself, then that's pointless. But if I'm doing this to really grow and mature in the way that I need to grow to then help other people, then I'm all on board. And so pushing myself has a different meaning and a different focus now. It's really easier to struggle now.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, life tends to, if we allow it to, give us more purpose and meaning. And you can see the bigger picture, I think, with our years that keep rolling along. And so, and what about the, okay, let's dive into the mental training. Okay. Because we could talk a lot about the athletic side. I mean, we were just saying we could spend an hour just chatting about the physical side, because you and I both love that competition and challenge. But let's focus, for my own sake, let's focus in on the mental side. You talk about mindfulness. What is mindfulness, and how does it play into athletics? And then I'm going to also ask you, how can it play into everyday life as well?
It's an awesome question. So how mindfulness is defined is it's an awareness of and a state of being when you pay attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So that's a big sentence with a lot of terms in there, but it's very much an intentional focus on the present moment, and being aware that that our thoughts are very, very much, they intrude our lives in a just naturally, that's what our mind likes to do. It likes to get into trouble. And so being able to calm yourself and focus on the present moment is super important, because that's the only moment that we ever have. A lot of us try to live in the future, especially in the world of COVID-19.
Sure.
When's it going to end? When's it going to end? What happened in the past? And I know that there's uncertainty is difficult, but being able to center yourself using your 5 senses of taste, touch, sight, hearing, and being able to really bring out those senses so that we can remain in the present moment. And that's helpful in sports, because there's a lot of, mental distraction going on. There might be opponents that try to throw you off, but really mindfulness is a strategy and a way of being to really stay focused on the present moment.
So can you give us an example of some time in a race where you have specifically used this practice of mindfulness and how it has benefited you in a race?
Sure. My qualifying race was California International Marathon for the Olympic Trials just back in December. And my mental strategy was staying present. And my mantra for that race was stay here. Like put it in quotes, stay here. So when I was going through difficult times, when I didn't feel quite comfortable, we might want to try to find an easy way out. We might want to slow down our pace. But if we're in tune with how our body is feeling and how our mind is feeling and what emotions we're going through, we're able to just endure that and experience it with curiosity. And that is, it's kind of like just accepting whatever thoughts and feelings come your way. And so during that race, I was very mindful of what was happening around me, just the colors, the sounds that I heard, looking for my brother and my husband, Mark, in the stands, and then seeing them and just loving that moment, trying to embrace everything that I saw and as vivid as I possibly could, to all the sounds and how things tasted, and an experience like that becomes so much more memorable because you're there. It's an emotional memory because you're not trying to distract yourself when you're on mile 4 trying to get to mile 25. You're just really enjoying and having that gratitude for the present moment.
That's awesome. And the memories that come out of that, even if the outcome, obviously the outcome was awesome for you, but even if the outcome weren't, you would still have those great memories. That would be positive memories, I would imagine. So what about in everyday life? Do you ever find yourself in a moment where you think, okay, my mindfulness practices can come in handy right now?
Yes, for sure. And I think that these days that we're living now I'm not going to say that I am 100% in a mindful state all the time. I have my own anxieties, my own vulnerabilities and worries, but being able to kind of calm myself through mindfulness and be present with my kids instead of wanting time to just pass so they go back to school, being very present and noticing different features on their face, like new freckles and just the way they're speaking. It makes life so much more rich. Yes. Even when we're feeling like the world is coming down on us. You can still have positive experiences every day because, you just look at a child and you watch how curious they are about their world or how they play. And it's just a beautiful thing to watch unfold. And those are positive experiences that lift us up.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. Real quick, we've got some friends from the RAC, from Rochester watching Jody from the RAC and Marin Umbright. So yay, our friends. Okay, so one more question on mental training, and then we're going to switch to youth sports and the next generation. So let's talk about failure. failure is massive. And what I love is that we just talked about staying present. And so that means not focusing on the failure that just happened. So for me in a basketball game, if I just missed a shot at one end, if I focus on that, I'm probably not going to be present to play great defense, in the moment. And so one quote that I love from you about failure is, you said, quote, "I have a bigger fear of potential regret than of failure." So how has failure shaped your success and your career? And any tips for us on how to view it differently?
I do love failure, and failure only comes when we try to do things.
Yes.
The quote of, I have a bigger fear of potential regret than a fear of failure. If you look at regret in our lives, whether that's like trying to do a half marathon and, wondering what that would be like. Number one, if you regret it, if the only way that you can regret it is if you don't try. And in that process, you don't know the outcome. And number three, you don't know how, this is the worst, you don't know how you could have been changed through that process. And that's what eats me. Like, how could I have been changed through that process? What lessons could I have learned about myself and about others through that process? Failure, it's great. Number one, you tried. Number two, you know the outcome. And number three, you will be changed no matter what. And number four, then you also get feedback on what you might need to do differently next time. So an example of that is the first attempt at qualified for the Olympic trials was last year at Grandma's Marathon. And I collapsed. I went out at a fast pace and tried to stay on target, but then fell apart at mile 16. Then 10 miles of agony just trying to get to the finish line. It's like, ugh. All right. So my dad, in his lovingly, fatherly way, he says, "Why don't you just do Boston? Just do the Boston Marathon. It's a great race." And for me, that meant that not to go for a time of 2:45 in the marathon, but now I just need to go for a 3:35. So I know that Boston's a big deal, but for a lot of people, but for me, I came in Grandma's 2:40, 2:53, and I'm like, that I can do it. I want a second chance. So through that failure, I made some tweaks. I embraced it. I still gave high fives to my kids at the end of the race. I did not mope. I did not, I dealt with it. I bounced back quickly. I reevaluated what I needed to do differently. And then what is the outcome? I had a second chance and I did it. And then I was able to run it in the Olympic trials, and boom, that's awesome. My career. So
no kidding. And just imagine if you hadn't given it a second shot, the regret and Ruth, you gave me goosebumps when you talked about how much going through failure changes us. And even though the outcome may not be great in the moment, the character building that can happen, the life lessons that can happen, the perspective changes, and also the deeper meaning to what we love and why we do what we do. There's just so many good things that come out of it. And so thank you for helping change our perspective on failure, not being that it's a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing.
It's essential. One story that I love is the story of Wayne Gretzky. When and I'm not a huge hockey fan, but my son is. But read about him and how he grew through hockey. And they give an example about how they used to do sprinting from the blue line to the blue line, so the far end to the far end. And so the coach would blow the whistle. Everyone would take off. This was in his high school days, and he would sprint so far, but at the very end he'd fall. And the coach at first, they were like, "What is this kid's deal? He's always falling at the end." Yeah. So in their eyes, they saw failure. In Wayne Gretzky's eyes, he was going beyond what he knew he was capable of, and so he fell. And doing that over and over and over, he became a fantastic skater. So,
Wow.
Stories like that, push yourself beyond so you mess up.
Yeah.
And then you'll know where your true potential is. I talk a lot about what your potential is when you just go to practice 2 times a week, and then your true potential when you go do unstructured play, when you go beyond what you think that you can. So your true potential is definitely different from your potential.
Oh, that's awesome, Ruth.
Yeah.
That's a great segue into training up the next generations, because you're a coach. You've got this incredible perspective of not only getting to the Division I athletic level, but pro level of competing on a pro level, and then the sports psychology that comes into it. And you're a mom, so you have a real vested interest in the next generation, in your daughter and your kids, obviously. So let's transition into that, because we have about 10 minutes left. So when we look at the current state of youth sports, is there anything that gives you pause or hesitation? I'll just leave it at that. What are your thoughts on the state of youth sports right now?
I would say that the number one, cost. We have to find a way that more kids can be included into sports, because they can change lives. We're choosing the populations that need sport the most. So that's number one. Number two, I would say the professionalization of youth sports. So looking at a 10 to 12-year-old and trying to make predictions on whether he's going to go into college or the NBA or the NFL. And I think that is just so unfair to our entire youth population, because number one, we're forgetting the late bloomers. And the late bloomers who could potentially do very well end up dropping out, because we're already labeling kids as elite and premier at age 10, 12. Every sport out there has an elite team at age 12. And I think it's just ridiculous. And then we're looking at the wrong things that we should be valuing in sport, which is character and which is sport IQ. And so in the US, we look at physicality as being the most important determinant of whether a kid will succeed or not. Whereas there's a lot of catch up that happens to those late bloomers that we can't stymie at age 14. They end up dropping out. So I think those things are the most important. Those would be my top two to tackle.
Boy, that's so good. And we've been watching the Michael Jordan documentary here. And best player in the world of all time. And as a freshman, I believe he got cut as a 14-year-old. Yeah. And he's the best of all time. So, that's just one little example. And okay, so on the flip side, what is most encouraging to you about the state of youth sports and the future?
I think my own personal experience is that I just love kids and watching them grow through sport. That's going to be a constant if there's good leadership at the top. But I think I'm going to say something that people might find a little striking, is that I think the most encouraging thing for me as a coach has been the potential of parents to really make a difference in how our youth sport landscape will play out. So teaching, coaching, educating, and respecting parents to get them on board onto your team, rather than excluding them into their own little pocket where they can make their grumblings about the coach and the team and why coach isn't doing these certain things. Invite them in, have them to the house. They are part of the solution of youth sports, and we need to integrate them more into this conversation. Because bottom line, they're the ones giving the funding, but also it's their experience too. Teach them how to watch their kids. Teach them that when they go home after a game, to ask the kids about character traits that they saw within their kids. And so don't teach them about technique. Most parents don't know how to play soccer. So teach them about when you got beat on that ball, I loved your determination. You got back every single time. So what does that do? The kids pep up. They do it again because they're, and they want to be praised by their parents. Some people say, don't say anything to the kids. Just leave it at that and get on with your day. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle where you want to, number one, stay positive, but you want to bring out what character traits you saw within them, what values your family really strives for. Because that can be replicated if the parents are praising that. Yes.
Well, I've never thought about it, just getting the parents on the same page, because they're at home with the kids, for the majority of the time, even though the kids are at school, but they can reinforce what a coach is trying to instill. And it can be a win-win for everyone.
Yeah.
And foster a really positive growth mindset environment. And, okay, so give me some examples of what you've done with your team, because you are coaching your daughter's 13 and under team.
Well, I would say that the most important thing that I can do as a coach is to know what my purpose is. Like, what is my why? And if I was to say, if all coaches were to be asked, why do you coach? They would say, to inspire kids, to help them learn, to help them with life skills. Okay, so that's for whom? If you're now doing everything for the kids, your framework in what you do will be different because they are for the kids. And now you say, what do I want for my kids? What's my ideal athlete? What am I trying to nurture? And if you ask a bunch of coaches, usually what they come up with for an ideal athlete would be always come up with 3 categories. And that is, I want a smart, intelligent player. I want a player, players have to have good ball handling skills, good ball control, good competence for the game, just good stick handling or whatever, or shooting or dribbling. And the other thing is character. So you say, what's the best ideal athlete? Most of the time, the coaches will come up with 90% character traits, about 5% competence, and about 5% cognition or soccer IQ or sport IQ. Well, we are just assuming that some coaches just focus just on the competence piece and assume that the other 2 things will happen. And so everything that I do, every single skill that I every single activity that we do, nurture all 3 components. If I say, okay, dribble around these cones, that will only take care of the competence piece that might help them with their dribbling. But do I develop character? No, that's just compliance with what I say. I don't want to develop compliant kids. I want ambitious kids, resilient kids who are thinking for themselves, who are looking at angles and shapes and diamonds and triangles and really understanding. So I don't do the dribbling around cones. So anyway, knowing your why, knowing your for whom, and knowing that you need to integrate what you are looking for in your ideal athlete. The second thing is that I coach based on a values-centered structure. So at the very beginning of every season, I'll ask my girls, we need 7 core values. And they've come up with fearlessness, positive mistake-making, confidence, work ethic, respect, lifting others up. And then because they have owned those values, because they have already named those values as their own, I didn't say these are important for me, so go do those things. They have come up with this on their own. And so whenever I'm looking for, during practice or during a game, I said, did you see how Dempsey was so fearless? She took on that player one-on-one, she beat her. That's what that's what this team is about. And I use those same vocabulary words over and over, and then they become those words. And so that's a great way to number one, know that you're also coaching people, not just the athlete.
Sure.
And those are skills they take with them for the rest of their lives. So,
yeah. Well, what I love about this too is, say we have a parent watching who doesn't have an athlete. Maybe it's their kid loves music or something else. This is applicable to everything.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so we've one quick question, and then I want you to send one little message to all the young athletes who might be watching. So let's talk about courage. We have like 3 minutes left. Courage, it's massive for instilling in ourselves and in kids. So how do you, what's kind of your approach to courage and how you instill it in your kids and in your athletes?
So courage is a big thing for me. I always say that kindness and courage make me cry. And my kids know that. They know that Coach Ruth will start crying if they are courageous. It's something about like just seeing these young kids go beyond what they believe is possible for them, take on a defender, do something that they wouldn't normally do. And I just started bawling on the sidelines. I don't know what it is. And I'll probably start crying just thinking about it now. But to tell a player, just have confidence, doesn't do jack diddly. It doesn't do anything for the player because they have to nurture that themselves over time. So how do we develop confidence and courage? Is to give them very small tasks that they can, that are maybe just out of reach or just in reach. And then they achieve that. Then they develop this confidence, and that grows within them. You keep setting the bar a little bit higher, and then they have more confidence to do it. A larger task of like playing goalkeeper when you are a field player and our goalie gets hurt and somebody has to play goalkeeper. That's the number one thing I say, have courage. Have courage. I don't care if you make a mistake, but let me see the determination in your eyes to just try and do your best. And they know, my kids know, my players know that that's a soft spot for me. So I think that they embrace it because I value it so much. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Well, okay. So let's we've kind of talked about for parents and coaches, how they can support the young athletes in their life. What is one message that you would have for young athletes growing up with a hope and a goal of at least continuing to play at some level?
I think this touches on a little bit of what I was saying earlier, where of their potential versus their true potential. But let me back up for a second. Number one, kids, is you need to know why you're doing what you're doing. You need to have your own purpose. That's number one. Number two, does your purpose bring you joy? It might bring your parents joy. It might bring others joy, but does it bring you joy? And so we want to do those things that bring us joy. So those are the top two, purpose and joy must be there. Number three is, where is your potential as a player, no matter what sport? If you go to practice 2 times a week, 3 times a week, and you're only playing for an hour and a half, 3 times a week, then there is you start guiding yourself over to your true potential when there are things like pickup games, unstructured play, loving to just put the ball against the wall, ball in a wall drill, just loving to be creative with the ball or puck, playing on your own, and that brings further more joy. Why? Getting better. Better when you have unstructured play, and when you're doing things on your own that you're not being told what to do, with during practice, being creative and investigative in your sport. So those are the 3 things: purpose, joy, and unstructured play. Keep playing on your own because you don't know where your true potential lies.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Okay. So we've hit on so many topics, and from mental training to courage to how we can shape that next generation. Ruth, what is next for you? What's on your plate coming up?
Right now it's kind of a daunting time, but it's an exciting time for me. in that I'm using all of the my personal and sport experiences to then propel me into my next phase of my career. And that is, I'm right now in the process of getting licensed as a psychologist so that I can work with teams, work with individuals, do consulting with coaches, with parents, with teams and athletes. And,
wow.
And I think I just, I have a different framework now with the story that has been laid out in front of me. So
absolutely. And I would imagine that wouldn't be just local. With the advance of technology, I mean, could you potentially, consult with teams or coaches around the country?
Sure. And I'll need to do a lot of learning from those coaches,
sure,
and teams at the same time. I really want to impact my own community.
Yeah.
And especially high school athletes. I think there is a lot to tap into with that population, and also just help change the landscape of the professionalization of youth sport. Educate parents on how to be a good parent, a good sport parent, and to let kids lead. So I'm really excited to share what I've learned and to keep learning from other people as well.
That's awesome. Well, I have no doubt that you will be successful in this next phase because you've got that mindset. You've learned, you've gone through quite a journey, and the process creates success in the future. So we have about 1 minute left. Quick fire questions. Are you ready, Ruth?
Yes.
Okay. Favorite race performance?
I would have to say California International Marathon. Right. 2:43. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Favorite place you've competed, because you've competed all over the globe?
Mallorca, Spain.
Wow. I've never been to Spain. I bet it was beautiful.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Athletes who you admire, or one athlete that you admire?
I would say Des Linden would be my top. She's a distance runner in Boston in 2018. Just super gritty, and everything comes from hard work. So love that mentality.
Awesome. What are you grateful for?
Family, health.
Yeah. Ditto.
Yeah.
What are you most proud of?
My kids.
Yeah.
And my husband. Yeah. So proud of them.
Well, and what people may not know just from one little interview that we've done is that not only are you so accomplished on the racetrack, I guess you say racetrack, yeah?
Well, it's called a racetrack.
And in psychology and counseling and mentoring youth, but you are a family woman through and through, and that just shines. And so somehow you are able to balance it, or at least give it the priority that it needs, those kids and your husband. So well done.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
This was fun.
I learned so many new things as my kids are growing older through sports, and just about staying in the moment. So many applications. So thank you so much for being here. And for our friends who are joining the workout today, if you want to jump over to the private workout group, I've posted a new HIIT class. It's workout number 17, Les Mills Grit Cardio, which Ruth, is all about pushing our limits.
All right, do it, gang.
Thanks again, Ruth. And we'll post in the comments below how you can connect to Ruth via social media. So have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. See you, Jess.
See ya.